Okay, what I think I'm going to do is try to make it as easy on myself as possible and just take 2 thinning flakes right where I think I'm going to be doing the notching. Okay, so I've had a couple days to think about it, or day and a half, or whatever it is. Just going to build up some areas here where I can take some flakes. I think I brought my book inside, so I'm going to have to go by memory. But I'm pretty sure I remember how wide that stem's supposed to be. Although the stems on these are not exactly consistent. Some have narrow stems, some have wider. I think most of them have straight-sided stems. So that's what I'm going to go for on this one. I still see too much of a concavity in here, so that's why I'm taking more flakes off in the seemingly opposite direction that I need to. Just gotta make sure that, see, there's no ridges really to follow, so it needs to be convex or domed. You don't have to follow a ridge as long as the surface is convex or domed. I think that's good enough. I can hit all along there. There's a couple places where it's nice on each side. I thought it looked okay. All right, that looks better. I'm going to hit the side that looks questionable first. Hit that side first, and then the better side after, or next. Maybe I should take a flake from the side first, because there's a lot of junk in there. I don't know. It's kind of steppy, so might not be a good idea to send one from the side first. It's kind of lumpy. I'd rather have it more smooth as far as the surface, but I think, I don't know. I'll just take one from the base and see what happens. Looks okay. Looks okay. Still kind of thick, but I'm just gonna have to live with it. Might be able to take one from the side now. A little bit safer since it is kind of steppy still, but with a reduced mass behind that step, I should be able to blast through. I'm not going to hit it too hard. This is getting pretty beat up. This is an elk antler spike, by the way. I keep getting questions on what this is. I think it's elk antler from Iowa. I find that antler, the further north you go, the better quality it is. Okay. Well, that's not good. Let's see. I should probably take some more off the tip there, because if I've got notches in ears, delicate areas, and then I hit very hard on the tip, it might snap one of the ears off. So I can run flakes later up here, but I can't be doing it with a lot of force. So let me take care of some of these forceful flakes first. It's hard sometimes to keep it steady, especially if I put a little bit of pressure on it. When I wind up, sometimes it slips off. Yeah. Those are pretty hard strikes, and I wouldn't want to do that when I've got delicate ears on the base. That was pretty good. At first I thought that the flake didn't come off. All right. Pretty sure I can do the rest with pressure or light indirect. Even though this is heat treated, it's still kind of tough because I didn't heat treat it that hot. You know what I mean? This type of stone can handle up to 500 degrees, I think. And what I mean by that is it can handle it without having a lot of internal fractures, crazing, or pot lids. Some of the other stone, especially the translucent agates and stuff, you can't heat them very high because they'll fracture. All right, let's see. Even if you dry the stone out for a long period of time, it can still fracture if it's just not the right kind of stone to handle high temperatures. This is a white-tailed antler cut into a transverse pressure flaker with a chisel tip. It's from Iowa. Some of my favorite stuff. And this is a shed. Sheds are a lot easier to get, obviously. Well, I don't know. For some of you guys, you can pick those up from hunters or hunt for them yourselves. I really don't do any mud. I don't really do hunting anymore. Couple of reasons. One is it's kind of expensive. It's getting more and more expensive here in Texas. And when I go hunting, I do prefer to use firearms. So so it's just one of those things that I only do occasionally. I have hunted with my primitive archery stuff, but only a couple times and not very successful. I haven't taken anything large, just small stuff with my primitive gear. Okay. Now, Shumlas did not have narrow entry notching, so I don't have to worry about keeping this entry narrow at all. But I'm going to try anyway, somewhat, because I am going to do andice points and stuff in the future, so it's always good to stay in, or to develop the habit making the entry as narrow as possible for the fancy stuff. And I'm using passive pressure, where I'm going to be putting a lot of force into it, but it's going to surprise me when it releases. In most cases, that's what I'm shooting for. Sometimes I know when it's going to release, and I just push a little bit extra hard when I know it's going to release. But I'm going to try to do passive on this. See, I wasn't sure at what point that was going to release. It released pretty soon. And what I'm doing is I'm just strengthening the edge for the next flick. I don't want it to crush. I've got a long ways to go on both of these. If I crush and stall it now, it's not going to be a good thing. And the passive pressure allows longer flakes to travel because you're in contact with the platform for a longer period of time than if you were to do aggressive pressure. So what I'm going to try to do is, create flakes as long as possible. That way it thins it down nicely as I'm going along. That's the theory anyway. Now, I could be using a punch, but I very, very seldom use vertical punches. Sometimes I'll use a horizontal punch to punch out notches, but I very seldom use it. I'm probably going to have to break down and use a punch. Now, some of these flakes will resemble punch flakes with this passive pressure, as far as I can tell. So it's possible they could have been using it in the past, this passive pressure technique. That released? No, did it? I'm supposed to go the other way. Okay. So yeah, they may have used this passive pressure technique in the past, so we'll see. I might do a video where I'm examining the flakes and comparing it between a vertical punch and pressure. So yeah, I think that might resemble punch work. A punch work flake, both with the negative scar and the actual flake. Let's see, which side did it come off of? Guess it came off of this side, right? I'll have to rewatch the video. Anyway, I have to be careful because see the that luckily it dished into, or what did it do? It dived. That's what I mean. It dived kind of and stopped instead of taking off that ear, because I did put a lot of pressure. Hopefully there isn't a crack underneath that. Yeah, it feels pretty solid. So just I'm going to clean it up right now so I don't have to clean it up later when that ear is delicate. I don't want to be pushing on it, well, if it's deeply notched. I gotta watch my finger. The finger will make contact with the edge, and I've cut myself that way before. So I've got to make a longer pressure flaker for the end-ice points to try to do it with pressure. Okay, that kind of cleaned up that area, so I can continue. Now the ideal shape for this, as far as I can tell, is semicircular. But it gets worn down in the middle, so it tends to get flat. And semicircular, I think, is better because it allows you to have more of a range as to where to position. You know, you can, it doesn't really matter how you position it. But if it's flat or if it's got lumps in it, it's gonna require you to be more focused on exactly what angle to use. This way I can have some variability, and it makes it stronger with it being semicircular. Of course, doing this also shortens this flaker, so I can't be doing that too much. Yeah, that one's a small flake. It's hard to get in there and use a lot of pressure. Yeah, I can do a little bit more if I use my legs to do that, but then I run the risk of blowing off that ear, so I may have to widen that notch out so I can. Yeah, let me do that. I'm stalling it, and I don't want to stall it really, really bad, because then I won't be able to continue at all. And if I widen the notch a little bit, I can kind of flake from the side here and then go on, walk it around to thin out the edge so I can keep punching in or keep pressuring inward. See, I'm starting to stall that notch, and with abo tools you need to be worried about stalling more than with metal. Metal can power through that, or you can use a file to improve it. When you're doing abo, you're not going to be able to use that kind of technique. So the only option I have is to widen it so that my edge is going to be thin enough to remove a flake. And that released way too soon. I may have stalled it anyway. See, when I was pushing on that, it released way too soon, and that means it only took a very short flake. It's possible I could power through that. And just because it sounds like I'm removing flakes doesn't actually mean I am removing flakes. It just means it's popping down off of that edge. See, that's what I mean about being thin. It's got to be very thin in order to continue with an antler pressure flaker. Now this one looks pretty good, but that's why, I'm not too worried about that side. I'm worried about working this side first. I work the difficult side first. That way, if I get worn out, I don't really need that much energy for the next one. It's already really narrow. It looks like it's going to be the width of a finished piece already. If it was wider, I could probably plan on using a lot more force and not having to worry about one of these ears being taken off by so much force. But since it's more narrow and it's about the right width right now for a finished point, I really can't do too much pressure work, heavy pressure on this. without risking snapping an ear off. I could make this stem a little more narrow and widen this side out a little bit more and try to creep in on this other side to get past the stall, because it is stalled right now. Okay, so yeah, I just kind of got in the zone and just powered through that. Snuck up on it from this side. I did a couple of little zigzag flakes and snuck up on it. Got the base of that notch thinned down and then started punching heavily, or not, I mean pressuring it heavily. I think that's what I'm going to leave it at that depth. I'm not going to go much further. Maybe one more flake. Yeah, I think these look similar to punch flakes. The scars look similar, so I'm pretty sure at least some of the andice points and some of these were made exclusively with this type of pressure work. And if you look at some of the real artifacts, you can actually see the same type of shape of the bottom of that notch, where it corresponds to the shape of the flaker. So either, the punch was either this narrow or the flaker was that narrow. I've got, maybe I'll show them later, but I've got some artifacts that have the shape of the tool pretty obviously imprinted into the bottom of that notch. Like I think I've got a Marcos like that and a Castroville like that. See, you can see the shape pretty clearly of the flaker in this case, and some of the artifacts you see it also. The shape of the end of the flaker. Now they could have been using, I don't know if they use a transverse flaker like this or one of these. Probably easier to use an Ishi stick style, but I find it difficult to keep from breaking this type of setup. That's why I don't have this as narrow. See, my Ishi stick is more beefy than my transverse pressure flaker, and that's for a reason. I'll break the Ishi stick tip if it's this thin. Okay, so I've gotten The depth pretty well set. Maybe one more off of this side. And on the artifacts, I noticed that they leave the bottom of these sharp in a lot of cases. So they don't keep pressing in and trying to go as far as they can and then stopping when it stalls. They just stop when they think the depth is good. Okay, and sometimes they'll flake on this side, flip it over, flake on that side, and so you'll see kind of an alternating type of flake pattern where you'll see deep negative scars on one side. You flip it over and the deep negative scars are on the same side on the opposite ear or on the opposite half. So that's what I'm going to do with this. Looks like I've pretty much done that. Okay. And it varies. Like on one of the endice, let's see, I have a cast here. They did kind of the opposite of what I did. So you can see the shape of the tool that they used. It's going to be more narrow than mine. But they punched out this side more. They favored this side more for the punching. You can see the it's a deeper negative bulb on this side, and you flip it over, and there's a deeper negative bulb on this side. See what I mean? On mine, it's the opposite. The deeper negative bulb is on this side. See that? So the napper on this andice favored this side here, flipped it over, and then favored this side again on that half. On mine, it just turned out that I did it the opposite. I favored more heavy punch work on this other side in each case. Okay. It doesn't really matter. It's just something that you notice after a while on these, after studying them. The andice is not much bigger than the Shumla. There are larger andice points, but you can see they start narrow and then they expand as they go up. So which means they probably were not using a long pressure flaker to get in there. They were probably using some sort of punch, or they were able to get their pressure flaker in there and push downward and inward like this, being very careful obviously, because that'll take off an ear very easily. It starts out wider on the first stage of this type of point. They usually have a very wide blade. You don't have to worry about blowing off these ears. So you can put a lot of downward pressure and a lot of force on these in order to punch out those flakes. But on mine, I didn't start out that wide, so I'm not going to be doing a lot of heavy pressure where I didn't. And I'll see. When I get to doing one of these, I'm probably going to start with pressure and not do any punch work. I do have the ability to do punch work with these little brow tine pressure flakers. I can do punch work, vertical punch, by setting that tool at the bottom of the bulb there and then hitting it. And this seems to be about, well, this is a little bit too thin. But I can try to match the width or the thickness of the tool to try to get one that looks just like this. made, but we'll see. Okay. Now all you got to do now is pressure, maybe a little bit of percussion to thin this down. I'm not going to go any further with the notching. I'm going to even out that base. Or that stem, I should say. I keep saying base, but I mean stem. I got more mass on this side than I should have, so. Just making it more wedge shaped and evening it out. Okay. I'm using this to do pressure on the edge right now because I want to get used to these flakers. Sometimes I have a hard time remembering how much pressure or what I can do with these types of flakers. Like I probably should use my Ishi stick for this. Let's see. See if I can get some long flakes. Now the pad might stop some of these. We'll see. No. I'm not getting anywhere with this, it looks like. I'm getting secondary crushing because it's popping off the flake at the base of the tip, and the rest of the tip is kind of dragging along the edge. So I think I'll just finish up with indirect percussion with a smaller flaker. So you have much better result with the indirect flaker than with the Ishii stick pressure flaker. You can probably get those steps from the other side. Almost. I'm losing some energy on the strikes because this tool tends to shift. Tends to twist more than the other one. It's a little bit better. Yeah, there really isn't any option that I can use to try to get those to run past the center line now, unless I take a really big flake off from somewhere. I'm really hitting super hard, and I hit the edge with the mallet. Yeah, I knew that if I was going to back off, I was not going to go all the way to the center line. But I backed off just because I didn't want another mishap. It's getting kind of thin, so I'm not going to do much more on this. I don't have a cast or a real Shumla around here anywhere, so I'm not sure how thin these were. The books I have don't show side views on these. I got a feeling they were pretty thin because they were using heat treated material, so they didn't have any excuses. You know, when you have bad material, you have to make thick points. But if you have really nice heat treated material, there's no excuse for not making them nice and thin. think on the sketches I was showing from the book, there's some bold, nice bold long flakes on these. I might not be able to do it. I'm getting a lot of, I guess it's called chatter, where there's a series of steps and crushing on some of these flake removals. It's not going to look as pretty as the real one. I think some of these may have been slightly serrated, or maybe even unintentionally serrated, so I'm not going to dress the edge too much. I'm not going to make it too regular. I'm going to make it kind of jagged. Yeah, I said I wasn't going to do a lot of heavy percussion once I got to the risky stage, but I didn't like the look of this side, so I took a large flake that does wonders to change the look of it. And then yeah, I think that'll work. I gotta finish this up. I'm trying to remove the flakes in such a way that I just hear a snap and that's it. I don't want to hear any crushing, but I'm also not taking too much time to prepare these edges, so if I get crushing, it is my own fault. I really should sharpen this too. Let's see, 23 minutes. See if I can finish this up in 7 minutes. I took the glove off to see if maybe that'll help give me a better feel for these pressure flakes. It does kind of give me a better feel for the pressure flakes when I don't have the glove on, but then I run the risk of getting a flake in between the pad and my finger. That's pretty annoying. Yeah, the flake pattern looks okay. Still kind of steppy, especially here. I got some weird things going on, but I think overall it's okay. I guess right now I just should concentrate on making the edge sharp, and that should be good. Should be good enough. And I need to get better at figuring out why some of these areas just don't release flakes very easily. Sometimes they do. Some of these platforms, I mean. Sometimes I can get a flake to release really easily and go pretty far, and sometimes I can't. Even if it looks the same, it could be just the inconsistencies in the stone, but I want to try different things and make sure that it's not just a lack of pressure flaking skill. So it probably is just a lack of skill knowing the feel of the material. And right now I'm using aggressive pressure. I could be using passive pressure, but I just want to finish it up. Okay, so I think that's good enough. On these, I don't know if they actually developed a bevel on these edges or not. Some of these started out kind of wide, but I think most of these Shumlas started out, you know, triangular and not oval shaped. You know what I mean? Gosh, that looks really steppy. All right, but I think that's good enough for the video. I don't want to risk breaking this one. Feels pretty sharp. Okay.